the life cycle of a buyer goes pretty easy to describe. We go from winning new business, first capturing the buyer, then expanding the business over time, and then earning their trust and providing us referral business. So we have 3 basic stages, but those stages are very different depending on what kind of product you're bringing to market and what your go-to-market model is. And so we're going to spend some time starting off this morning talking about those differences. But I want to make a comment before we get started to lay the groundwork that it is not just a formula to go from one stage to the next. We are selling to people. We need to connect with those people. We need to connect the emotional side with the rational side. So whether we're earning their business to start with or we're expanding it over time, we have to always keep in mind that human connection is really what's driving the business. And for someone who really feels passionate about that is Rene. I want to give him a chance to talk about the life cycle for your business at Palo Alto Networks and how you focus on creating that human connection at those 3 very different stages.
So thank you, Christina. Just as a setup, I'm with Palo Alto Networks. I was there long before we had a product and customers. So I was there to onboard the first customer and ship the first product. I always say to folks that I know well that I'm in a B2B business where the 2 B's stand for boring. So a boring to boring business. So we sell boring things to boring people. And the problem with that statement is that, whatever you think of what we do, what we sell here, it's pretty darn boring. And the folks that we sell to in general are pretty darn boring. Unless we can trigger some type of connection, some type of emotion. Because if we go entirely rational on this, right, and we speak in the 3rd person to those folks and say, people, users, customers buy this, right, you've lost. And so making that connection where the emotion you trigger, you understand what that emotion has to be, and the story you tell them is the story that is going to make them smile, right? Or whatever emotion you want to trigger. And I would volunteer, it's not fear. Right? And coming from a guy that sells security, telling you not to use fear, right, tells you how deeply I believe that you have to create that human connection on an emotion that will generate a positive response. So it has to be a positive emotion. Now, the math can help you target, right, where you want to do this. Right? Early on, when you acquire customers, later on, when you expand with customers and make those customers, in fact, your biggest and best sales force, but it's got to be humanized. Because if you don't, right, you're going to fall in the trap, right, of truly being a boring to boring business.
So David, how do you approach the 3 stages of life cycle in your data business?
Sure. So first of all, I'm David Hsieh with Qubole. We're a leading big data platform in the public cloud. And we're also a boring to boring company. We sell infrastructure for managing big data workloads in the cloud. And so we're fundamentally an enterprise SaaS business. So we have subscription customers. And so we try to think of the hourglass and not the funnel. And so the top of the hourglass, it is sort of the funnel. So it's awareness, consideration, preference, purchase. But we believe that because we want to increase the lifetime value of our customers, marketing has a significant role in the bottom of the hourglass, which is adoption, expansion, and enlistment. And like a lot of SaaS companies, we're sort of a land and expand company. So our goal is to land in a customer, get some kind of footprint, and then find other ways to expand our business. And marketing has an important role to play in helping to make the adoption happen so that people are interested in expanding, looking for expansion opportunities, and then getting happy customers to refer us to other new companies.
And how do you humanize that at each stage?
As well as we can. One thing that a lot of our customers use us for artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. And so we've actually adopted that internally to marketing at Qubole. And so we actually drive our whole hourglass through the use of AI machine learning technologies. And I'm continuously stunned at how much information we can know about prospective customers. We know what products they're using. We know what jobs they're hiring for. We know what things they're interested in and showing intent around. We know what they're reading. We know where they're reading it, like which sites they're reading it on. And so one of our challenges, to Renee's point, is how do we take this wealth of information and insight about prospective customers and turn that into something that is interesting, kind of reaches both the left brain and right brain, definitely not creepy. And it's a much harder challenge than you might think. I mean, we literally could write an email, sort of a Spock-like email that said, hey, I know you were on these 3 websites reading these 3 articles for 4 minutes and 32 seconds, right? That would be bad. So, I don't think it'd be effective for sure. So, part of our sort of challenge is to take, I always joke, we're sort of very insight rich. And now what we have to do is, but we're sort of slightly operationally poor. Like turning that insight into a scalable machine is sort of the big thing that we're focused on.
Okay, thanks. So you need to walk that line between friend and stalker.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Richard, your business is very complex in that you have a range of products that are sold through multiple channel types. So maybe you'd introduce yourself and also tell us a little bit about the business at IBM Aspera.
Hi, Richard Heitmann. I run the marketing team at Aspera, which is now an IBM company. And the way we think about how we communicate with the customers really is around 3 dimensions. The offering, right? We have to be able to describe the value that the offering delivers in the terms that the customer understands based on the offering. By industry. So our technology is also somewhat horizontal and boring. At the end of the day, all we do is we move data, very, very large data, at very high speed over commodity internet. So if you're a studio and you're moving your dailies, or maybe you're doing a post-production and you're moving the clips out to a post house, the data is called content. On the other hand, if you're a life sciences researcher and you're trying to solve cancer and need to share genome sequences, if you went to them and you said, hey, we help you move your content, they would scratch their head and go, huh? So we have to communicate to the audience based on the industry that they're in. And then the last one is the route to market. So for our SaaS offerings, everything's done online, and so everything from the Google AdWord that shows up, the words you use in that ad, the landing page and how you describe the solution on the landing page, in product marketing, that's all is completely different than if I'm at a third-party trade show. And that now that potential buyer is walking up to our booth and the experience has to be completely different.
So while you have 3 very different businesses, they're all boring to boring, and they all serve multiple audiences, either because they're horizontal or because they're a horizontal platform that's been verticalized. So you have these 3 different types of opportunities to reach your buyer when they're new, when they're expanding, and when they are in the position to become a referrer. How do you allocate your resources as a marketer across those 3 challenges? And how do you allocate more than your budget, your team? And I want to start with David.
Sure. So, sorry, I'm thinking that I'm never going to be able to say B2B with a straight face again. Yeah, never. So in terms of sort of the way we think about it, we're a growth stage business. And so for us, driving top line growth is sort of the most important thing. And for a SaaS business, there's sort of 3 buckets of financial metrics that, investors and would look at, right? So first they look at, what's your rate of new customer acquisition? How well do those customers expand over time? And then what does your churn look like? So I think the question of sort of resource allocation to some degree is contextual. So in our business, we're very fortunate to have almost 0 churn, and we're very fortunate to have very high organic expansion, and that's because people tend to have lots and lots more data. So if they're using us to process the data, we get good organic growth in their data, and it doesn't mean that it means we're still interested in expanding it in new divisions or departments or use cases or whatever, but we do get sort of a certain degree of just natural expansion. So for us, the real focus from a growth perspective is on new customer acquisition. So I'm 70%, give or take, allocated to new customer acquisition, and about 30% focus on sort of the bottom of the hourglass. But, in a different business, I might be more focused on preventing churn, for example, right, and have resources allocated to that. Or if, we think expansion is slower, we would shift the resource allocation, both in terms of budget and people. So I think it's very contextual.
And would you be shifting that on a quarterly basis or on an annual?
I think it's sort of on an ad-needed basis. I mean, typically you don't see wild swings from quarter to quarter, and I think, it runs the risk of whipsawing your team if you try to change too quickly, right? So, I don't believe that we all need to march to, even in a public company, to march to the beat of the quarterly drummer, but, you do want to be able to take a step back every once in a while and just say, have I allocated, according to the needs of the business at the time, and, should I be making some shifts?
Is it similar for your business, Rene, or do you allocate your resources differently?
So fundamentally, what David said about the cadence at which you adjust, I agree. At the scale that we operate, which is now 3 billion plus, you start to see seasonality, and that you build it into your plan. So you know what are traditional customer expansion quarters and customer acquisition quarters or months. So you build that in with that foresight. Because after 10 years, you have a pretty good grip on what that looks like. Now, the question as to where you're going to point your guns, so to speak, has a lot to do with the outcomes that you have to achieve. In our business, where customer acquisition is at the front burner because the lifetime value expansion that we can model out will tell us we have to acquire new customers at a certain rate so that we can sustain the growth expectations for the company based on lifetime value expansion that is typical for the cohorts that we have onboarded. But at the same time, we have to maintain or perhaps even improve the lifetime value expansion of the newer cohorts. So you look at that, and it's a pretty complex financial modeling you have to do, and then you got to look at how your tactics have yielded and how you then staff for those tactics so that you can achieve. But first and foremost, it is modeling your financials, the outcomes. Then you derive pipeline targets based on historic conversion rates, aging analysis, source analysis, and then you start to layer in your folks that then align with those goals, knowing how to do that. Not the other way around, right? Marketing teams oftentimes get hired just to have folks, and then let's go see what those folks can do. That's not how I approach this. I approach it as a top-down from the business perspective, and that will then yield a personnel plan, but that plugs into the financial plan.
So Richard, what's the most challenging stage in the funnel for IBM Aspera right now? You're what, a 5-6-year-old company at this point?
Yeah, the company was started in 2004, experienced 50% year-over-year growth, and then became part of the IBM family in 2014.
So even more mature than I thought.
Yeah. So first of all, the way in which we plan really depends on the maturity of the company. So if you go back to the startup, the discussion goes something like this: is the market bigger than we are, right? And if it is, invest. And it's literally that simple. It's bigger than we are, so then it becomes a conversation not about where you should invest to grow. It becomes a conversation of where you should invest to grow the fastest. And then we start to look at things like whether our technology is ready for a particular industry, whether the industry is ready for our technology, and if so, great. Because the market might be huge, but if the technology isn't ready for it, you obviously are going to have to wait. And then, obviously, as you grow and you become more mature as a company, the decisions you make have a larger financial impact, positive or negative. Then you start to move into much more rigorous planning. So you look at the total addressable market, and then you start putting in all the instrumentation, and you do all of the measurements to make sure that you're maximizing the return on every dollar you spend across every route to market.
So that's an interesting point, because I live in about a $20 billion market, and you say, well, $20 billion, right? But so one of the things that I said about how do we align the organization has to do with the financial outcome that the analysts and certainly our investors and shareholders expect from us. But as a marketer, I also want to know that I talk to enough people, because I need to talk to enough people, right? Because I can skew my pipeline towards a few big guys, right? Big studios, big security spenders, which makes it incredibly fragile. Whereas if I do something else, which I've now done for about 2 years at my scale, is I want to have at least 50% of the TAM in pipe. Now, it turns out that those numbers kind of come together, but at the scale that we operate sometimes, right, that also gives us a cushion, right, to deal with a lot of variability in where the pipeline comes from. So it's a good point, the TAM point you make. Oftentimes people forget to think about that, and as marketers, it's a very important parameter we have to understand, right? And don't think of TAM as the biggest thing you can come up with, right? Do it as the thing you can actually service. Right? You're not pitching the Series B, right? You're actually trying to get money from people, and that's people, not VCs, right? And customers. So be modest about your TAM and be aggressive about how much of that TAM you can put in your pipeline.
And about talking to as many people as you can, that's the reach, right? And it's so important. And so one of the things that the way I think about it is I'm not in the demand generation business, because I cannot generate demand for the product. The demand is already there, and the demand is based on industry trends, the expansion in broadband, the expansion of large data, the urgency that customers have to do more with less. So the demand is there. I'm in the demand capture business, and so there's people out there right now that have a pain point, and my solution will solve that pain point and deliver value. So my job is to be in as many places as possible, so when they're out looking for me, I make it really easy for them to find me.
Now that's for generating new business. What about your expansion business?
So one of the benefits that we have with the technology is the network effect. And so in terms of customer advocacy, the best customer advocacy we have and expansion within a particular industry is when a major studio tells a post house that they need to buy an Aspera license in order to send content up to them. So you now have the customer not only is selling on your behalf, but they're mandating that. And we literally get an inbound email that says, I was told by insert major studio, I need a license, I need a quote. So that's the best. Obviously, very low cost lead, high conversion rate. Once you get out of that, then obviously becomes a lot harder. And again, the advocacy needs to be based on the route to market. So the advocacy that you get from an online digital try to buy conversion is completely different than what you would do with a large enterprise face-to-face with an on-prem deployment. So there it's really more about customer workshops. It's about constant communication with them, bi-directional in terms of product feedback. And it's the interactions that you do across every function, from the SE to sales to marketing to support.
And how do you create that consistency, David, in your business? The consistency of focus on the buyer as a person, the consistency in message, the consistency in building a relationship rather than just engaging in a transaction?
That's a great question. I think probably not surprisingly, we're heavily invested in our technology stack. So, we make a lot of efforts to make it as easy as possible to get as comprehensive a view of a customer or a prospective customer, both at the company level and at the individual level, so that we can avoid kind of asking dumb questions. Somebody else was talking earlier about how badly marketers sometimes market, right? And so you've all probably gotten the email that says, I'd love to get a 10-minute phone call so I can find out what your problems are. And I always think, if you can't figure out what my problems are already, why should I talk to you? So, and in today's world, again, we have these amazing sources of data. And by the way, it's like, you should look into this if you haven't already. It is scary what marketers can know about you and your behavior, both in a B2C and a B2B context. And so what we do is we try to surface the most relevant details and make sure that, we have kind of really good instrumentation so that, when we have an discussion or an engagement or a communication with a prospective customer, we're as coordinated and concise as possible, and we demonstrate that we have context.
So having the data, I want to bring this to you, Rene. Having the data is one thing. Knowing the customer is another. So do you want to talk about knowing the customer?
Yeah, and come back to the consistency question you asked, because I think consistency is actually our worst enemy. Because consistency would potentially suggest that we should tell the same story to everybody. And that is dead wrong, right? Because if somebody has already bought from me, right, I should go right to, hey, you trust me for this, now go do that. Right? I know so much about that person that it's now becoming a conversation in the second person. I can do a whole lot of things that I couldn't before. Now, the consistency has to be there in what it is that we do and what makes us different and relevant. Right? That is a consistency, because you cannot be a different company with a different value proposition depending on the customer. It doesn't really work that way. But what is important is the translation of the science that you use, the data mining, the creepy stuff, right? Like, hey, what are my customers or my prospects searching for? Because if I know they're searching for X, I can do Y, and they don't even have to come to you to know that, right? If you don't know how to do that, I can teach you how to do that, right? When they're searching for your competitors. It's an easy trick. But how you respond to that, and again, what you tell those folks, in what voice, and be that in the second person, be it educational, be it promotional, and very importantly, hire the folks that can speak in that voice, i.e. not your CEO, not your founder, right? Never have them involved in marketing, making your marketing materials. You should even never have them approve your marketing materials. Forget about it. They know nothing about this stuff. Hire folks that know how to communicate, right, at the right level, in the right voice, right, to the folks that are going to buy your products. Right? So practitioners, folks like them, hire those. They don't have to be marketing folks. They have to speak in that voice. Right? And that typically means it's not a marketer or a traditional product guy. Also, keep the product guys typically a little bit farther away from your customers than they want to, because they speak in the wrong voice. Right? That translation is incredibly important, because whether somebody's brand new, right, it needs to be explained what it even is that you do and why they should move away from Cisco, in my case, to me, or somebody's bought $1 million and now is going to go another $1 million. You got to tell them exactly what they want to hear, not what you want to tell.
So Richard, you're starting to hire domain experts too. What's caused that shift in your hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so critical, again, when you're talking to somebody that's coming from a particular industry, that you speak in the terms that they understand, and you get instant credibility if you're from that background. So for example, in terms of a new technology we have that really helps broadcasters do live streaming, well, our new sales engineer that supports that he's an actual broadcast engineer. So he's been the one delivering the live events that you see on TV, and when he's talking to a client, he has instant credibility because he's been in their shoes. The same, our North America marketing person came from the life sciences industry, and as we're trying to expand within the life sciences, she gets instant credibility when she's talking to those prospects and to the customers. Now, the difficulty, of course, is that an industry focus is highly resource intensive. And so you have to be very careful where you pick and choose. You can't have a sales engineer for every single industry you target, or a product marketing person for every single industry. So you really have to pick and choose.
David, how are you measuring, what are your key metrics for the 3 stages in your pipeline?
Sure. So we were having this discussion backstage. At the end of the day, I think it's all about pipeline. If marketing is not, helping to create pipeline, then there's probably not a huge amount of reason for us to exist, right? And you can score super well on other things, but if at the end of the day the company's not selling stuff, then we all end up going away. So we start with pipeline, and we look at pipeline generation and opportunity generation. There's one interesting sort of side benefit of that, which is pipeline's driven by the sales team. So as a metric, it's sort of not gameable by the marketing team. And I think one of the things that, marketers get in trouble for is, we have all these sort of MQL, SQL, all this other stuff, and all of those metrics are gameable, right? And hopefully some of you have done that. I know I have. Right? So, but what happens is, like your CEO looks at the metrics and basically they ultimately figure out that you're sort of gaming the metrics, like why are MQLs through the roof but sales are down, right? And so that's not a good phenomenon. And so, like I've sort of rotated to just judge marketing on pipeline. Sales creates it. So basically, I can't game it. I can't call up a sales guy and say, "Hey, can you create 3 more opportunities for me?" Right? That's not going to happen because the check and balance is they get inspected by sales management. So, right, it's sort of this ungameable metric. And then from there, we break it down into new customer pipeline and expansion pipeline. Right? And then from there, we look at a set of other sort of lower level metrics. That help us, get a little bit of predictability around, what the outcomes will be. And so you can sort of think of it like a tree.
And when you're looking at pipeline, are you measuring only the number of deals, the dollar value of the deals, the speed of the deals moving through the pipeline, the conversion rate? How are you measuring pipeline?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we look at all of those. So, we look at sort of depth and breadth. So we look at the number of opportunities. We look at the value of the opportunities. We look at conversion rates through, various steps in the funnel. At the end of the day, you end up building a model, which is how you think your business should perform, and then you measure to see how close you are. But, we try to resist the temptation to do unnatural acts to meet the model. Right? The model is just a way to project where you think you're going to end up, and the market sort of ends up telling you. And, we do look at whether if a metric is off, like our conversion rates are below or above where we thought, why is that? And is that a market phenomena? Is that an execution challenge? Did we do something amazing and that helped change things? But we try not to be slaves to the model because I think it leads to unnatural behavior.
Rene, which of those metrics is the one that you pay special attention to because it most affects the growth of your business?
Dollar value. I don't care how many opportunities I have. Well, the statistician in me will tell that it does matter how many there are, because if it's one for the entire quarter... Well, now your slip
is really showing. You not only market boring things, but you have statistics as your background.
Yes, I'm a trained mathematician.
Yeah. I'm an art history major.
So the amount of opportunity that is out there, and in my model, by the way, I own opportunity. The head of sales owns forecast. We triangulate using a variety of techniques, and we better be right? Because otherwise we lose our job. And that's been the case for 10 years. In 10 years, I've never spoken, because that's how long we exist. I've never spoken once to the executive staff or the board about leads, about clicks, because it's all bullshit. Right? The only thing that matters is pipeline. And if it's there, right, it can be acted upon, and if it's not, you're going to not make your quarter. It's that simple. Now, by the way, that also means that I sign up for the vast majority of pipeline generation, whether that is on new account acquisition and expansion, right? Because everything correlates to actions we take with our customers. Now, it is very important that we understand the motion in the pipeline, right? That is conversion, the second most important, timing, the third most important. So in that order, I guess then you can start to build propensity models and risk score models, right, on that pipeline.
Well, Richard, given that you've got so many different approaches to your go-to-market, how do those metrics vary for you, and which are the most critical for your SaaS model versus your enterprise model?
Yeah, so we do measure all the same statistics that I'm sure you guys do, all the way from the start of the funnel, top, all the way to the end. What we do is we use different benchmarks depending on the different offering and the different route to market. So on the digital funnel, for example, the conversion is going to be a much lower percentage. You get a lot of tire kickers. You're always constantly optimizing. Once you realize you're getting a lot of really terrible leads, you start adding negative keywords to try to filter. And so both the benchmark you use is different, and then the way you optimize that is different. Whereas if I'm in an industry where I'm a market leader and I'm going to a third-party industry trade show, I know the people that are going to walk up to my booth are high quality, and probably 9 out of 10 will ultimately buy. So the conversion rates we monitor are much different.
So in your enterprise business, what is the metric that you personally pay the most attention to?
Pipeline. Definitely pipeline.
Dollar value of the pipeline.
Yeah. And maybe something to think about here is the progression of sort of maturity as you're managing this data. We're a service industry, we're a service organization to sales. If we're not generating pipeline for them, then we have no business being there. But how many, and this is some of the conversations we had a few weeks ago, is how many people have the problem where a salesperson has an opportunity and it's not in Salesforce? Right? They haven't put it in there because the manager is going to be on them. Is it going to close? Is it going to close? Is it going to close? So they don't put it in there.
You don't pay them commission.
Yeah. So
I'm shocked. Shocked.
So a lot of the analysis we do is actually understanding where the problems are with the data. And how many times have you got into a meeting where you're discussing this? Everybody knows the data's crap. I can say that, right? But nobody brings it up. It's the elephant in the room. So having tools that allow you to pinpoint where the problems are first allow you to then make sure that you can fix the data. Now that you have accurate data, now you can start to do some predictive analytics that say, okay, historically based on what we've done, what are the chances that we're going to hit our number? And if not, what can we do today so that we're better prepared to hit that tomorrow? One of the tools that we just started using is funnel cake. And so now we're in a point where we can go to the salesperson that's the biggest culprit and actually encourage them to follow the process.
You know, you're hitting on a point that, further to my point about distribution of pipeline, not in one deal, the biggest challenge you're going to run into when you scale your company is to factor out your pipeline all the way down to, I made the comment, the guy in Cincinnati, so that he or she can make their target. And optimizing it for that outcome is hard, right? Because they will have a mix, and then all the way down to that individual, to their territory, to their district, right? To their whatever other territory management you do. That's the automation part that you got to go do. You cannot do that with humans. It's going to be impossible at scale, and you got to figure out techniques and technologies to do that. And that can be funnel source or whatever, but you got to spend time because sales guys will always tell you there's not enough pipeline until there is, right? And it's your responsibility to show them there is, but not theirs to show you there isn't.
Well, so many business-to-business companies also sell through channels. So how do you get the visibility into what's going on in the channel partners' pipeline, and whether you have provided them sufficient support to be able to get across the finish line with the business? And that varies considerably, so I'd like you to start, Rene.
Yeah, we are 100% through channel fulfilled. That doesn't mean that is 100% sourced by channel. We are sticklers when it comes to deal registration, much like the comment about opportunities that don't exist in Salesforce. If a partner doesn't register the deal, they will not get extended the discounts that we give them and the rewards we give them, and then too bad for them. And if sales reps don't reveal deals in Salesforce, we don't pay them commission. Much like we treat our channel. So you got to figure out systems that keep these folks honest, right? And couple it with the rewards that you're going to give them for the work. And so deal registration has been there forever, and that keeps them very honest. Now, that doesn't necessarily tell you how much work they're going to perform in the opportunity management and deal process, but it's a good starting point to start to reveal this, and then open your systems to a point where they participate in the life cycle of that opportunity, right, until it closes, right? And not keep the data to yourself and then kind of hope that one day you will find out whether the partner or not did anything.
David, do you have that challenge too?
Well, we sort of, we're a direct sales business, so we're an enterprise belly-to-belly direct sales. So we aspire to have partners in channel, but we're not there yet. But we do, I think, a somewhat interesting thing. We don't guess at who we should be selling to. So we basically have built a model, and it looks at the combination of propensity and intent. And basically, we know that at least in the first world countries, there's 5,000 companies that we should be selling to. And what we've done to help the sales force is we geomap them. And basically, so instead of having a guy in Cincinnati where maybe there's not enough companies who need big data in the cloud, we basically have mapped the universe of the 5,000 companies, and the sales team is basically building territories. And so, for no surprise, but a hotbed of big data is the Bay Area. So we can put 4 reps in the Bay Area and 1 rep in the Midwest or whatever, right? Because we know what the size of essentially their addressable market is.
So then, are you using account-based marketing, and how many players are involved in your deals?
So we are, so for us, sort of account-based marketing is the foundation, and then all this kind of machine learning stuff sort of sits on top of that. And then in order to be successful with it, though, it requires unusually tight coordination between sales and marketing. Because, sales VPs walk in, they go, oh, look, that whole part of the country has nobody covering it. Maybe I should put a rep in there, right? And what we do is we try to, for example, provide them data that says the reason that you don't need a rep there is the number of companies in, that state or that group of states or whatever is not big enough to support, a viable territory. And so we're sort of shifting the culture of the company to be much more data-driven in how we approach the targeting part of marketing.
So how many people are involved in the typical enterprise deal for you, Richard?
Prospects or internal?
No, how many buyers are involved? How many people are involved on the buyer's side in purchasing your product?
Be anywhere from 3 to 30, right?
Okay.
Depending on the size of the company.
Yeah, the same. 3 if it's a small department deal. If it's a ELA, large enterprise license deal, it could be 30.
And Rene?
An order of magnitude of that.
You can have up to 60.
Oh yeah, easily.
Rene said something interesting, which I was going to pick up on. Because you said you take responsibility for the majority of pipeline.
The number is mine, whether it comes from sales reps or from marketing or from channel partners. It's still my ass on the line for the entire pipeline.
Okay, so we do the same thing. And I think, that's also a bit of a sea change, at least in the enterprise B2B world. I don't believe that any opportunity will ever happen that doesn't involve something that marketing did. I mean, if the least possible case, they've been to your website, right? And so, hopefully that had some influence in conversing, right? But there's no deal on the planet that marketing will not touch in some way, shape, or form. So we don't try to, get into like fine-grained attribution of this was a sales-created opportunity and this was a marketing, like all that's crap. Because basically, marketing plays a role in everything, and there's so many unmeasurables that, trying to, if you try to dice these things too finely, it doesn't actually help you, change your investment or change your messaging or change anything. And so we just say, look, we will generate the pipeline for the company, and we have a bunch of things that we'll do to get there. And, sales' job is to take that pipeline and convert it into revenue.
So one of the dirty secrets in sales and marketing for B2B companies is that while we all know that there are a lot of people who are involved in the buying process, our Salesforce instances or our CRMs almost never have more than 1 or 2 of those people in the instance, which means we're limited in how we market into that company. Do you suffer from that problem, and how are you addressing it? And I'll start with you, Richard.
Absolutely. It goes back to the quality of the data. And so we have situations where the contacts are not in there. So you have somebody that actually we sold to and just logged a support incident, and you go into Salesforce and the contact's actually not even in the database. And then they wonder, so it's both on the buying side and then on the support side, because we also blast out, we do something like 2 million emails a year going out to leads and to our install base. And we get the question, how come I didn't know that you had this new version of this new product? So in terms of the life cycle, it hurts you on the front end, and then it hurts you on the back end too.
Yep, absolutely. How are you dealing with it?
Well, we're by no means perfect, but as a SaaS service, we have a certain advantage in that people who use our product, we know who they are. So at least in the bottom of the hourglass sort of post-sales adoption, expansion, enlistment, we know everybody that uses our products. We know who the admins are, and so we have more or less near perfect visibility. From a prospect and pre-sales perspective, we work very closely with sales ops and sales operations to be super clear on what our joint metrics are. And because we're jointly measured on them, we can focus on the same areas of data quality. And so, because if there's stuff that marketing needs that sales doesn't care about, you're just not going to be able to get people to, do things that don't benefit them. So we try to focus on where can we get, joint metrics, what behaviors do we need to create the data so those metrics are accurate, and that seems to work pretty well.
And so maybe to follow up with how we deal with it today, and maybe a question for you guys is how do you deal with it? Because the only way we found is regular data loads from our support system into Salesforce, and then we have a scrub club. So we go in and manually cleanse the data. And that's the only way we found today to address it.
We just flog our salespeople.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
so
tried and true.
That's a good point. So we, despite what you think, we're 70% SaaS business. So we know all of the folks and our support system is Salesforce, as is our prospect and people management software. We do something else. So we know that lots of conversations go on between salespeople and prospective customers and partners in email. So we actually, since we own that as a business, it's not theirs, it's ours. We use techniques, data mining techniques in email in our Office 365 instance to get all that information into Salesforce. Right, so every conversation a rep has with a prospect or a customer or anybody else in the world goes into Salesforce. We will infer opportunities. We will infer scoring on those opportunities. If the sentiment is very different than what the guy says in his forecast, we will get all of that information into this. And as a public company, I can tell you, the lawyers will approve these things. Don't worry about this. The other thing is we then turn that around and prescribe to reps what to do. So we tell them, call this customer now. They need a phone call, or email now. By the way, don't email at 3 p.m., email at 1 p.m. because the propensity for them to open is higher at 1 p.m. than 3 p.m. So that's what you have to do to instrument such a machine. But getting the data in, you got to figure that out within your context. And it's important because...
And you're able to do that through channels?
Of course, you can do anything. It's just do it.
They're a security company. They can get in anywhere they want.
Yes.
Okay, Jeffrey alluded this morning to the importance of tension. How would you describe the relationship between marketing and sales in your organization, David? Is there tension there, or would you describe it as amiable?
We're a little bit of both. I mean, honestly, I think you want a little bit of healthy tension. But, we, because we're sort of after this ABM and with this sort of machine learning stuff, it sort of changed the way we have to work with sales in a very, very sort of deep way. And so, we try to be, as aligned as we can on processes and on sort of guidelines and on systems and things like that. Sales always wants more pipeline. Actually, in our world, they always want more pipeline, period, even if they have too much. So, there's always a little bit of healthy tension around that. If you're at 3x pipeline coverage, they want 4. If you're at 4, they want 5. If you're at 5, they want 10, right? That'll never go away. So I don't sort of mind that bit of healthy tension. But what we try to do is de-escalate the non-productive sources of tension. So attribution, whose lead is this, is a form of non-productive tension, in my opinion. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't change your behavior. If marketing sourced it or sales sourced it, if it closed, that's the only thing that mattered, right? So we've tried to weed out the non-productive sources of tension and focus on the ones that are sort of more productive.
So a couple of years ago, I did a study on sort of the state of B2B marketing and heard from almost every CMO that they had a very good relationship with sales and they were well aligned. And I've been in a lot of companies, and I can tell you that is probably not as true as the numbers were saying. So I decided to go back to those same companies and talk to as many of the heads of sales as I could. And I learned a very interesting thing, and that was that marketing felt their relationship with sales was much better than sales felt their relationship was with marketing. So Rene, when was the last time you had lunch with the VP of sales at Palo Alto Networks, and who invited whom?
So the answer is never. However, every time we see each other, no matter where it is, we hug. And that there's a very...
That's the hug metric.
And yes. And so whether that is on a stage like this or wherever we run into each other, we hug, including in front of the board and our investors. Because if we can't hug anymore, we're done. Right? That's kind of my view of
That's
life.
your measure. Yeah, yeah.
Lunch,
Richard, how about you?
Yes.
Lunch never, just drinks.
You gotta have your priorities straight.
Our head of sales and I, we invented Friday afternoon wine club. And literally every Friday afternoon, we go out for, a drink, and, we invite other people to come with, and it's actually a great sort of team building and camaraderie building exercise.
So you all three think you're aligned, and if I called your VPs of sales and asked them whether they were reliant upon you and they saw you as a trusted partner, they would tell me that, what would they tell me? What would they tell me?
So I do think we're aligned, and I do think tension is important, but you sort of have to define the tension. The tension between a sibling rivalry, where you're both trying to be the best you can, absolutely. Where it becomes negative tension or it starts to hurt the business is where one person or one group has to lose for the other to win. And so that's where it comes into alignment. If they have to lose for me to win, then that's bad. So we have to be aligned so that we can both be pursuing the same goals and ultimately both be winning.
Gotcha.
Mine would say he's a great guy. I need more pipeline.
Okay.
You're hugging, so that's nothing more to be said.
He wants me to invest more in golf, which I will never do in my life.
All right, well, our time is up. So I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. The life cycle is, of course, a very important thing for us to all focus on across all of our businesses. So I hope you gained some insights and some helpful information in our panel today. So with that, we're done.
Thank you.